Greetings, and thank you for joining us this evening for the special conversation following our virtual member advance screening of Summerland from IFC Films. My name is Nick McCarthy, and I'm the Director of Programming at NewFest, New York's LGBTQ film and media organization. NewFest has been around for over 32 years, and you may know us best for our annual LGBTQ Film Festival in New York. We'll be celebrating our 32nd edition this October virtually. So please save the dates for October 16th to the 27th on your calendar, because we're bringing you almost 100 new premiere films then. We also host and produce year-round programming that shine a light on the LGBTQ experience, much like this conversation tonight. And I encourage you to check out recent conversations that we have archived on our YouTube and Facebook pages. Recent virtual panels have included Oscar-nominated director David France around his urgent documentary, Welcome to Chechnya, which is on HBO currently, as well as another conversation we had around another HBO series called I May Destroy You by Michaela Cole, which is a groundbreaking series. We hosted a conversation around that series titled On Being Queer and Black, and it featured renowned author Darnell L. Moore and Pulitzer Prize winner Michael R. Jackson. So please check out those conversations after tonight, of course. This evening, we're celebrating Jessica Swale's stunning Summerland. And if you'd like to recommend the film to everyone, which you should totally do, or you'd like to watch it again yourself, which, I mean, luxuriate in its beauty once again, of course. Summerland is going to be available nationwide starting this Friday, July 31st, via IFC Films. So please tell all of your friends about this wonderful film. And we're excited tonight to have been able to give you a member preview of this beautiful film. Tonight's conversation will feature lead actress and star Gemma Arterton, and also Olivier Award-winning writer-director Jessica Swale. The conversation this evening will be moderated by the Artisans editor at Variety, Jazz Tanguay. Before we bring Jazz on to welcome our guests, let's take a quick look at the trailer of Summerland and conjure up memories of this beautifully moving film.
People like to have something to believe in. It's what everyone wants. Ooh, magic. Stories have to come from somewhere.
Miss Lamb! We were expecting you an hour ago.
Sorry?
Frank? This is Miss Lamb, your new guardian.
I don't want him.
We've all got to do our bit.
I'm supposed to go to school.
Go on, then.
Where is it?
This is Frank. He's an evacuee from London. Miss Lamb, I know you're busy writing your stories.
Academic theses.
They don't look very interesting.
I wrote them. Do you believe in heaven?
Yes.
Well, you shouldn't. What happened to all the people who died before the Christians? Where did their souls go? Summerland.
Where's Summerland?
It's a myth.
Stories have to come from somewhere.
Oi!
It's my dad's. In 21 Squadron.
Well then, what are you waiting for?
Why don't you have a husband?
Why don't you have a wife? There was someone. Once. Here we are. So I say, make the most of it.
Was she the one you loved?
Would you think it was strange?
No.
It's Frank here.
What is it?
His father. We just had the telegram.
Life is not kind. Anguish is inevitable. What matters is how you deal with it.
Poor little lad. Having to bear it on his own.
He's not on his own.
Nobody knows how to be a parent. But you two. Gosh, you make quite a pair.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jazz Tanguay, Artisans Editor at Variety, and thank you to NewFest for having and hosting this evening, and thank you to everybody out there. So the first thing before I bring Gemma and Jessica out, I just want to say if you've got questions, send them over the chat window, and we'll take the questions towards the end. So without further ado, Let me bring out Gemma Argentine, who is actress and a producer. She made her debut in St. Trinian's back in 2007. She's been in Rock and Roller, VITA Virginia, Clash of the Titans, and she's got her own production company, Rebel Park Productions. Hi, Gemma.
Hi, thanks. Lovely to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us from the UK, where it's like 11:30, almost, well, 11:30 night time. So
it's pretty late. It's nice to be staying up late and, you know, talking film. It's good.
And let me just bring out Jessica Swale, who is a British playwright, theatre director, screenwriter, who wrote Blue Stockings, and you both met on Now Gwen, a play that you did. And so I'm just excited to talk to both of you. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, this is such a pleasure to be here and be part of your festival. I wish we could be there in person, but in the spirit of COVID lockdown and Zoom, this is lovely to be here anyway.
And the great thing about it is we can have people from all around the world joining in, watching this. But congratulations on this beautiful film that just gave me goosebumps revisiting the trailer. You know, congratulations to you both. So you both met on the set on Now Gwen, which, you know, so you've known each other quite a while. So talk about working on that, and what was the first thing you heard about Summerland, Gemma? What did Jessica say to you?
So I took over from Gugu Mbatha-Raw, who originated the role of Nell Gwyn, in ages ago, and I did the play in the West End, and so Jess and I got to know each other then, and then at the end of that was we've become really good friends and we wanted to work with each other again. I said, could you send me this? I'd heard about Summerland, and all I'd heard was that it was a brilliant story between an older woman and a young evacuee during the war, and so she sent it to me. And as I said, Alice was originally written older than my playing age, so I didn't read it as an actress at all. I was reading it as a producer. And I hope, you know, people get the same reaction that I did when reading the script. I was really moved by it and really surprised and sort of swept away in it. And I called Jess afterwards and said, we've got to make this film somehow. And you should direct it, and then she said, oh, you should be Alice, and I'll rewrite it so that the age comes down. And that was just like amazing, because it's such a fantastic role, and one that a sort of role that I hadn't had the opportunity to play, and so I was thrilled.
I mean, I love that. And Alice is such a refreshing character. I mean, I followed your career, so seeing you play somebody like this, I mean, what was it like to play Alice, this woman who's just doesn't really care about her life? She's, you know, talk about that. Like, you're seeing that on the page, and then obviously on screen, it's beautifully shot.
Well, it was quite a departure for me, because there are aspects of Alice in me. I can be quite blunt, but I'm generally not like her, and I'm a very nice person. So, I remember we did a read through of it in my living room, really early days, just to kind of hear it with friends and things. And I was so scared and there was an actress in the room that was reading Vera at the time, who actually is kind of like Alice, like very erudite and very brash. And I remember thinking, oh my God, she's just like, she's nailing it, and I'm just not doing it right. I felt like there was a long way for me to go, but luckily we had the time to kind of work on it together and get there.
I think you're doing yourself a massive disservice there, Gem.
As per.
But when Gemma tells you, okay, you've got to direct this, yeah, what was your reaction? And then talk about like the journey from writing it to bringing it to the big screen.
Well, it was interesting because I was a director first. You know, I I started in the theatre as a director, and that's always been my sort of happy place, because I love working with people, I love collaborating, and I'd never seen myself as a writer, to be honest, because I kind of had a notion that writers were people that cut themselves off and were very quiet and studious and stayed in sheds, and most of them had big beards and long grey hair, and most of them were sort of, frankly, middle-aged privileged white guys. And as I was growing up, I just had no experience of plays or films that were written by women. So it hadn't really crossed my mind, because I had no examples of that was something that would be a valid option. And actually, I think it takes a certain amount of boldness to see yourself as a writer, because what you're essentially saying is, the thing I have to say, which I have imagined, is worth sharing with all these other people. I'm going to take several hours of your life and tell you a story, and I can entertain you. And I think as women, we're sort of not really encouraged to feel like that. I feel like to have that kind of a voice takes quite a lot of self-belief. So that has to sort of come from somewhere. So it's quite a surprise to me to become a writer, and but I had already been directing a lot in the theatre, and that felt much more comfortable, because it's about working with a group of people and creating something together. And so making this film, well, it was just such a joy, actually, but it was something that I hadn't quite, I wasn't sure what was going to happen with it. It all came about very naturally, and having worked with Gemma on Nell, I knew that she could, she's such a chameleon of an actress. She's so brilliant at sort of creating so many different roles, and a diversity of roles as well. So I was really excited about the idea of working on this together. And so when we had worked together, and when we'd become really good friends, even though I'd written the part, as Jem mentioned, as a slightly older part, it seemed not a huge leap at all to rewrite it to suit her at a slightly younger age. And as soon as I started thinking about that, actually, I thought there's a lot of value in that in the story. And actually, I think it's a better story, and it's a more original story if our heroine is a bit younger, because it takes it away from the sort of much told story of the older woman, the sort of isolated woman who lives on her own, and she's past her childbearing years and she's a witch. Actually, to play that and to have that as a younger woman, where you're isolated because of your preferences and your way of life, and the fact that you're not sort of husbanded, I thought there was much more in that.
Yeah, I love the casting. I mean, you know, Lucas Bond is brilliant as Frank, and then, you know, you've got Gugu as Vera. Talk about like how that all came, how your cast all came together.
Really, it was a sort of case-by-case basis, and it was quite a mixture of sort of methods of casting. Lucas, I mean, writing a movie with one of your two main protagonists being a 12-year-old boy is really very, very foolish. Because you just simply don't know that you have what you need until you're there, unless you cast someone who's extremely experienced. And I really wanted Frank to be someone that we didn't know. I wanted him to be somebody mysterious and new, and also someone with a spark. And so we saw loads and loads and loads of boys trying to cast him, and none of them were quite right. And we started to get worried, because we did think, you know, if we can't find the right kid, we can't make this film. It really, really lives or dies on his performance. And then Lucas came in, and I just thought immediately, even just having a conversation with him before he read, oh, this kid is really clever, and he's intelligent, and he's got a curiosity which is really attractive, and he's obviously both worldly and sort of naive, and that's a really wonderful sort of meeting of traits for Frank, because he's both naive in terms of his experience of the world, but he has an open-mindedness which belies something much deeper than that. And so I was so pleased that he was good. And we workshopped his performance because I wanted to see whether he would be flexible and all that sort of thing, and he just nailed it. And I was then really delighted when he met up with Gemma and they had great chemistry, because I just knew at that point that we were on the road home and that was going to work. And as for the rest of the casting, it was funny because Gugu and I have been great friends since our very, very first job when we met, which was probably about 15 years ago now, before she'd ever set foot on a film set. And we hit it off from the first moment because we both, had a great deal in common, but we'd never worked together on film. But the chance to get to work with someone that and particularly on a film where you put so much of your heart and soul into it, it's really important to feel supported, I think, by your cast as well. And I just knew she could play Vera because she's got such energy and charisma and she's so warm. And I thought, I know that she personally has all of those traits, but also that she's such a brilliant actress that the other parts of Vera, the sort of the need to expose herself and be vulnerable, I know that she's got that in her and that she's wonderful. So it was such a privilege to work with this whole cast. I feel like that's it was wonderful.
Yeah, I love those scenes, Gemma, with you and Lucas. But the other scenes I love were like those moments where Alice is just there thinking, and just how, your cinematographer, Laurie Rose, captures like, what's going on in your eyes. Like, talk about how you crafted Alice's like internal world. Like, did you discuss like a backstory? Like, how much of that did you go into as like an actress?
Yeah, well, it's worth noting that Laurie Rose and I have worked together before on a really, really intimate film called The Escape. And so he just had this, and we wanted him to do this for many reasons, but also for me personally, I knew that he just has this connection with me where he can catch stuff. He sort of knows, and I feel very comfortable with him. He's like this big bear of a guy, and yet you can be in the most vulnerable position and he's right up in your face and you just don't even notice him. He's so discreet and you can feel very vulnerable and free with him. And that's such a key relationship for me on the set, the DP. But in terms of the inner Alice, of course, there was a lot of it in the script in terms of her, why she is the way she is, and we actually shot the stuff with Vera sort of towards the end. It wasn't towards the end, but it was, I had it there, like there was some of the stuff that we'd shot, so I had that to kind of refer to. But of course, like I always do backstories for characters anyway. It's a nice thing to do, and so, where she grew up and her relationships with people and her relationship with her dad, which was very key to her, and, what happened after Vera and why she got into folklore and all of that. But then when you're doing it on the day, you just go somewhere, I don't know, it's a mixture of imagination, but also drawing on your own experiences and things that have happened to you, which will get you in that same state, I guess, of relationship loss and yearning and regret and all of these things. That's it.
And I love just how you framed and how Laurie framed like those scenes with Alice and Vera. Talk about their relationship and how you wanted to frame them and what it was like shooting those, working with Gugu and shooting those scenes.
Oh, well, I wanted them to appear to be memory. That was really important, that the audience would very much see them as how Alice remembered those stories rather than necessarily the whole truth. And that's why they're shot in a particular way, and the colours are quite vivid and the music is quite particular, because when she looks back on the past, she's so haunted by it. She sees it as a perfect past in some ways, and she remembers particular aspects of it. And I wanted to use the way we shot those scenes to tell that story. But also there was hints in those scenes that there's a connection between the past and the present, which I won't spoil for people who haven't seen the film, but there's lots of sort of clues in those scenes about why Alice is how she is and how it all ties up. But it was really important to tell that story, I felt, in a sort of honourable and a sort of simple way as well, because I didn't set out to tell a gay love story. I'm straight myself, and I felt like I feel very strongly as somebody who works in a community which is very diverse in every way, in terms of sexual preferences, and in terms of race, and in terms of class. The world of theatre and film in London is brilliantly sort of multicultural and multi-diverse in that way, as is the community that I live in South London. And I just get very, very frustrated by the fact that we only see a very narrow window of storytelling, and it's always the same people and the same characters, and I am really bored of the sort of the same thing. And I really felt that in terms of gay stories, a lot of my very best friends are in gay relationships, and they're people that I love very dearly and I know very well. And I just felt like every time I see stories like their stories depicted on screen, they don't reflect what I think of as stories that I can relate to, and that reflect those communities. That they are always stories specifically about people where the trouble in the relationship is because of their sexuality. And I feel like every period film that deals with a gay relationship is normally about how hard it is to be gay, rather than being about these are two people who are in love with each other, who go through the same trials and tribulations as the next couple. And actually the drama in Summerland comes from quite a personal place with me, which was the debate about motherhood and whether I wanted to have a child or not, with the man that I'm with, and trying to balance that with the notion of whether sort of work and my passion for my work, and can I do both? Or, these are sort of universal issues. And I thought, why is that story always exclusive to straight people? That is a story which I think is shared by everybody. And I hope that this being a mainstream film in some ways, telling a story about gay people where their story isn't specifically about that being the problem. I just thought, how are we going to become a more open and open-minded and sort of accepting community if we only ever tell one story? And it's the same for me in terms of the fact that it's an interracial relationship. I feel like so much of the time when we see that on screen, the drama of the story comes from the fact it's all about race and how tricky that is. And actually the consequence of that is that actors of colour, of which there are many brilliant actors, get limited to roles where the stories that they're asked to tell are only about race. And someone like Gugu, who, is very, very dear to me, I really want to see her playing every part, not just parts where she's the hero in a story that's specifically about a person of colour. I want to see her playing all sorts of different parts. And so that's a very long-winded answer. But I suppose what I'm saying is that, I'm really excited about the day that we see all sorts of relationships and all sorts of people on our screens that reflect the reality of the sort of brilliant diversity of the community that we live in. And I would like to hope that, as somebody who's lucky enough to have a voice in film, that part of my responsibility is to make sure we bring those stories to screen.
Yeah. And that's what was so beautiful about the film, is that, the interracial relationship wasn't the issue. Like, it was just a beautiful story that just had hope, you know, so full of hope. I do want to talk about one scene, the Blitz scene, and we see parts of that in the trailer, but, you know, it's not a spoiler to talk about it, but talk about, Gemma, for you too, like shooting that, because that was done in that was a one-shot take. So talk about down in London, the Blitz.
I've only just recovered from that. That was
that was on our very last day of filming as well, of the actual main shoot. And it was the one day that we had, you know, because this was not, it had a decent budget, but it wasn't like mega budget film. And so we had like one day to shoot all the London stuff. And we had, you know, we did it a few times. And, you know, each time you're just hoping and praying that no one element goes wrong. And there's so many things that could go wrong. Yeah. But those are the most thrilling things to do if you know you can have many goes at it. But I don't think we could have many goes at it because we were really restricted time-wise. But yeah, I mean, it's a massive choreography. My dad's actually in that shot. He was an extra that day, and I see him going through, like he was holding a box or something, and he's so sweet, and he's like just doing exactly what he was told. It's like the AD department's nightmare, but also their raison d'etre, those scenes like that. So hard to choreograph.
Yeah. The tricky thing about that scene was that what I really, really wanted to do, we were determined, and Laurie was determined to get that single shot, to do it as one journey. But we knew that anybody with any sense would get coverage of the rest of it, so that we could cut it together with something. So in other words, you do the shot with Gemma all the way through, and then you also get some of facing the other way, you get some of the people with the ambulance and the guy on the stretcher and the people moving their stuff around, and etc., etc. That's absolutely what any sensible person would do in order to have the ability then in the edit, if you don't have your perfect long one shot, to just do it, because you might well want it to be 25 seconds instead of the minute long that it is. And if you don't have anything to cut in with it, you have to use the whole minute, and you have no way of shrinking it down. But we were so determined to get the one shot, and we did that first, that we kept doing it again and again and again, thinking, no, it's not quite good enough. Someone walked in the way, which meant that by the time we had to wrap, we couldn't get any coverage. So it was sort of that or bust. So we knew by the time we got to the edit that we either used that long shot as it was, absolutely from beginning to end, or the whole scene disappeared. But thankfully we got it on the last take. But the last take of a sort of 6-week shoot at probably about 12:15 at night, when no one knew what on earth was happening anymore. But it was worth it. Those things, they're the bits that make you age about 10 years in 5 minutes.
Brilliant. So we've got some audience questions, and let's see what we have. Okay. So this is from Brenda. How did you determine to research and include folklore?
Well, I love folklore because I think there's something about the sort of, I love magic realism, and there's something about the sort of meeting of real people and a need to explain something that doesn't quite make sense to them, and the notion of magic. And it's a very old British tradition as well. We've got lots and lots of folklore, and when I was writing the film, it was at the time that Brexit was beginning, and I was starting to feel very nervous about the notion of Englishness and what that meant, and very sort of horrified by the idea that to be English could somehow be to do with nationalism and patriotism and things I really didn't agree with. So I was already thinking about what old Englishness meant, because that was the thing I felt connected to, was somehow the sort of lore of the land. And the more I thought about that, I thought about pagans and Stonehenge and those ancient stories, and why I love storytelling and why I like magic realism too. And so I just started reading. It was all books, and I didn't do a lot online, because actually I find quite often when you're doing research that reading a book, even if it's a sort of encyclopedia, I had quite a lot of encyclopedias of folklore, there's something, it's so easy to sort of click through when you're working on the internet and just get and just get the Wikipedia version of something. Sorry, Siri's decided to join in. It's midnight and she's obviously bored. So I read a lot of books, and there was a couple of books in particular that I found useful, and what I came across was the story of Fata Morgana first, and the fact that there were these islands that were floating in the sky in various myths. And I thought, oh, what if that's familiar? What's that familiar from? Where's that idea come from? And it made me think, oh, what if the character tries to tie together this British myth with, I wonder if there's an Italian myth that might say the same thing. I wonder if people saw those sort of mirages in Australia, what they would have thought they were. And so then it was a sort of natural spin from there. I just read and then read some more and read some more.
Yeah. Gemma, did you do any research or diving into period books or movies for this?
Yeah, there was a little bit of folklore research. I also think I watched some sort of classic British love story type stuff, like Remains of the Day and Atonement and things like that. But no, I don't think I did, like, not in comparison. Sorry?
We watched Arcadia. Do you remember? There's a
oh, that was such a good reference.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, Arcadia, which is this film it's all made up of sort of old footage from British history and a lot of kind of weird traditional stuff. The music by the guys from Portishead and Goldfrapp, and the music is amazing, really trippy, and it just kind of felt appropriate for Summerland at the time, didn't it? Yeah.
Kind of modern response to The Wicker Man. You know, my favourite films. So yeah, there's quite a lot of that. And there had been a play a few years ago called Jerusalem in London, which was sort of about folklore as well, and that had made me think there's something really particular about the fact that everybody seems like they feel a bit discombobulated at the moment, where we're looking to the past for answers, and suddenly folklore feels like it might have a resurgence. There's something a bit sexy about it. So, except for Nick Cage in the new version
in the new Wicker Man. I haven't seen that version.
Don't ever watch it. But not in that film.
So what was great about this film, or behind the lens, was that you had a 50-50 gender parity on your crew.
We did.
Right? Gemma, what was that like for you to be an actress on a set where you had gender parity? And Jessica, you can talk to that too about your hiring process.
I mean, in terms of being a performer, I just thought it was like, oh, this is brilliant, because there's a lot of banter that happens on set usually, and the behavior changed. People's behavior just slightly modified. Maybe people didn't have as much fun as they usually do. They're like the bantery ones, but sometimes it's at the expense of other people, or sometimes people can feel excluded from the banter, and it can be very male dominated. And I subsequently went on to an incredibly sort of macho male set and felt the difference immediately, in that, we were talking about on Summerland, you'd have everybody. So we were talking about all sorts of things, and there was no sort of subject matter that was not kind of listened to. Whereas on other film sets, I felt like if you start talking about, you know, something you've been watching on TV that you love, and there's people that aren't watching that they're not interested in that, then that conversation is shut down. And I just felt like it created this, first of all, it was just empowering to see all these women doing things that are typically masculine jobs, like being the grip and carrying the camera around and, you know, laying down track and having female electricians. And it just sort of meant that we were all, it also created a real company of people. Like everyone was very invested in the work because there was no sort of clique, like boys club, girls club. It was just everyone together. And like the biggest result of that really is like the real show of that is everyone ate lunch together. Like nobody went off to their separate areas, which is what usually happens. You know, that was just like the first time that had ever happened in my whole career, where it was just this lovely group effort. And I can't advocate for it more. Like there should be more of that. Absolutely. And Jess, you were really strong on that when crewing up, because it's not always easy, because people have their friends, they want to employ their usual people that they work with, and we were really strict about it. And Laurie was amazing. He used new people. Yeah.
You did, and that's, you know, that does mean that it's a bit harder work for some people, because they have to start either training folks because there aren't enough women, for example, who have done those jobs before, or they have to look a bit further or not use their best mate. But I remember having an early conversation with some of the funders and the folks who were producing, not Guy and Adrian, they're our main producers, they were super behind this, absolutely. But with some of the other people who would actually be doing the employing, and them saying, you know what, it's just going to make it harder. It's just, it is real extra work for us if you're going to insist on this. And I remember saying, well, okay, so we better get started then, because this is what we're going to do. There's no question. And part of the reason why we had that confidence and we knew it was possible, but it was because Gemma and I had just made Leading Lady Parts together, which was a short film. And even though it was a short, you still need the same scale, same size crew as you do on a whole film set, because there's still all of those jobs. There's over 100 people involved in that short. And we were determined to have, we wanted 100% women on it, and we got about 99. There was 2 guys involved out of about just over 100 people. And it was a real lesson to think there are people out there, you just have to work really hard to find them. And I think the other thing it does, and I think this is partly about gender, but it's also partly about when you choose to work on set, is that I was really determined not to have a sense of hierarchy.
Right.
And it's partly because of coming from theatre, because in theatre everybody mucks in, and you can be the lead actor in a company, but you're not more important than the next person. It's very much a sort of a group effort from the beginning. I think probably because it's a very, very old profession, and because people work together often, and because there's no money in it, so there isn't the sort of star system quite so much in a lot of theatre. There is in some of it, but so for example, it's a tradition on a film set, it's just normally accepted that if you're a lead actor, Gemma knows what I'm about to say, if you're a lead actor, or if you're one of the very important creatives, that you go straight to the front of the lunch queue. And as this was my first feature, I remember walking onto set and thinking, yeah, but why? Because I don't get a longer lunch break than the next person. Like, you know, it's as important that the lighting guys have got to be back before the end of lunch. You know, whereas some people have got a lot longer after that, but actually the crew are the people that we're expecting to turn around really quickly. Why should we jump to the front of the queue? And it was Gemma really setting an example by being number one on the call sheet, so to speak, and Gemma and I standing at the back of the queue and with everyone else. And I remember people coming up to us nearly every day for the first couple of weeks and saying, you can go to the front of the queue, and making an effort to say, you know, everybody needs lunch. And I think until you set examples like that, actually, the spill of that was that everybody, I hope, I hope, felt respected and felt like they were valued equally. And I think that is an important precedent to set. So there's work, there's just traditions that you can question in film, and they really help.
That's amazing. We've got another question. Bravo on the gorgeous film. Gemma, you and Gugu have such chemistry in the flashback scenes. Did you know each other beforehand?
Well, we did a bit, and that was because of Jess, because Gugu played Nell Gwyn originally, and I took over the role from her. And I remember I didn't know her. I knew of her, and when I was taking over the role, and I remember she was nominated for an award for that. And I went to the award ceremony, and I just accepted taking over the role. And she came up to me and said, "I'm so pleased it's you that's taking it over. I couldn't think of anyone better." And it was just the nicest thing, because I was so worried about it. And she was just so sweet and gifted me, blessed it, kind of thing. And then actually, after that, we would go out and hang out in the prep and go for cocktails and things, which is something that we continue to do. Not obviously recently, but we will. So yeah, but it's not like we knew each other a lot, but I think it's because Gugu is friends with Jess, there was this sort of shortcut there, I know Jess well, and she did as well. So we just felt like, oh, these are the people, these are our people. So it was very quick. And because Gugu lives in America, she couldn't come over that much before we started shooting. So it was all riding on us just being able to get right into it. And I remember that's what happened. It was just instantaneous. It was what it was, That was great.
That was amazing chemistry. So.
Oh, thank you.
What or who did you each consult to get a handle on lesbian life in the 1930s?
Oh. Well, good question. I did a lot of research about the period, and I knew quite a lot about Oxford in the 30s and it's set in the 20s, actually, that's the bit that we see in the film. Having written a play about women's university experience, actually, when women were first allowed to go to university, I'd done research sort of from the 1890s up to the end of the 1920s, and there was a lot more women going to university by that point than we expected. So I was very familiar with that, but rather than sort of specifically researching the gay experience, I felt like what I was trying to do was to tell a story that was about two human beings who were in love with each other. And so, and actually, because the central tenet of that story isn't about sexuality, it's specifically about two people who just love each other. I didn't feel like reading lots of books about that experience would be particularly helpful, partly because those stories are so often about the difficulties, and actually what I wanted was to tell a hopeful story, which is about two people who have a fantastic time together, which I do think is a reality. And it's certainly the way that Vera is remembered by Alice as well. And so it was more about sort of looking at that experience of people now and then finding a way to tell the story as if it's a story from the past, because for me it's about empathy and it's about being human, and I think love transcends the boundaries of time. I don't think people necessarily loved each other in a different way in the past to how they love now, and for me it's really, really important making a period film that it doesn't feel like it's a sort of chocolate box version of a very formal past, because I think particularly in the theatre, plays that are set at that time have a sort of formality of language and behaviour and extremely long sentences that somehow alienate us a little bit and make us feel like that's the past and this is the present. But this film really, for me, is about speaking to modern tropes and questions, and about the debate about how we care for each other now and how we appreciate and understand our differences now. And so I didn't want it to feel, I wanted it to feel like those women could have existed now, I suppose.
Timeless. Okay, so we have one question from the it's our last question from the editor of Queer Media Matters. Was the story between Alice and Vera originally longer, and did some parts not make it into the movie?
Yes and yes. But as with every part of the story, you know, it wasn't that we cut their love story in order to make room for anything else. I think if you looked at the original script, inevitably, in order to make something a length that rolls along, everything has to get honed and chipped away at in order to make one story that we will sort of go on a ride with. And essentially, it's a story about Alice and about her journey. And so I had to prioritize what in the story would be essential to telling that. And I think the key motivator in that is her relationship with Frank and how Frank brings her out of herself. And I love the story of Vera in the past. And actually, most of those scenes were much longer than they appear in the film now when we shot them. They were full scenes. But I always wrote them as full scenes knowing that we would want to have snippets of her memory. And I thought it wasn't until later on when we were looking at them in the edit that it would be useful to know how much of those scenes to include. And in earlier cuts of the film, those scenes were longer, which was lovely because you got more of the story, but the consequence was the mystery of it was lessened. And I really wanted it to be that they left us wanting more. So each time we went back, we went, who's that person? And what was she about to say, rather than sort of telling too much. And it meant for me that the payoff of realizing that story eventually was greater because we got to then enjoy the moment. And I do think sometimes if a character is mysterious, then less is more. But the very, very first draft of the film that we watched together, Gemma might remember it, in the little room in Soho, had the full version of everything in it, and it was nearly 3 hours long.
Wow.
Which would never have passed muster. One day there'll be a director's cut. And so the lovely person who asked that question, I'm sure if you ever wanted to see the full version, we could share it with you, but it might take up several evenings in one go.
People are going to want the director's cut now that you've said it. I wanted more. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful story. Congratulations on Summerland, which is being released on Friday in UK cinemas and on IFC cinemas in America. Again, Gemma, Jessica, thank you so much. It's so much fun, and thank you very much, NewFest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Guys.
Real privilege.
Pleasure.